Thank you, Danny.
Yeah.
Right, at least I hope it's anywhere near cool. We'll see about that. Please let me know if you don't hear me in the back. I'm delighted to be here with you guys. I'm a fan of so many of the people that have been part of this event on a regular basis. This is my very first time here though. So I'm really excited to be here, excited to be meeting and chatting with some of you already. One of the things that for me has become, we'll use that slide, thank you very much, has become a reality is the fact that many of us hope to see Orlando grow and become all that we think it could or should be. And Orlando, if you've been here a while, you know that we have this world-class name that everybody knows. Anyone in the world knows where Orlando is, or at least some of what happens here. But you also know that Orlando is still very much a small town, especially if you've lived in many other towns. And so I call it sort of a teenage town. It sort of looks like an adult, but not really, if you know what I mean. But we're in a real hurry to grow up. We really want to become this world-class city that we know we're capable of. And in the process, we're at this very, very interesting inflection point as a community. And so I have the privilege of running this organization called Lift Orlando, which in many ways is a brand new experiment in our city to take advantage of this very critical window of opportunity. As Orlando steps into this sort of race to grow, it seems we're at the cusp of not only a great growth spurt, but maybe for the very first time in recent history, a growth spurt that will hit us at a time where we have an abundance of bold, forward-thinking leaders that are thinking about how to scale and how to grow and take advantage of all these investments in a way that's wise. And so we're basically a group of business leaders that have partnered together with Florida Citrus Sports to target specifically the neighborhoods around the bowl for holistic neighborhood revitalization. And so our mission statement is to break the cycle of poverty through neighborhood revitalization. This slide, we talked about, Chris and I were talking about speaking on color and the idea that sometimes color, as much as we celebrate it, can also divide us in ways. And understanding the nature of color in the context of our community, color in not only the difference of ideas, but in what immediately comes to mind, the difference among races. Especially for us living in the South, we have a legacy that is in the air with us, whether we acknowledge it always or not. It's part of our story and what we're living today. And I want to share with you what I've learned in just a year into this work about that dynamic in the shadow of urban growth. The question that challenged us at the beginning was, can we possibly mobilize the business community to be part of really helping catalyze a solution towards some of our most complex social problems in the city? Is it even possible? Can business people do more than just write checks? Because it seems like that's what they end up being relegated to, and solving these social problems is exclusively in the hands of nonprofits and politicians. And thank goodness for social entrepreneurship in that way, but more and more people of every size enterprise are starting to think, how do we leverage our social responsibility resources to be part of actually not just helping or alleviating or improving the lives of those who are disadvantaged, but how do we literally transform their situation? And we're learning more and more that that is done by focusing on communities, creating environments where it is more likely for people to succeed than to fail. The other question, which really brought us to that part of town and really was sort of the inciting incident, was Steve Hogan, the CEO of Florida Citrus Sports, was facing the fact that in the poorest neighborhood in Orange County, we were raising money to build a $200+ million sporting venue. And to a lot of people, that just did not make sense. Why couldn't we use that money for other better things? And when ribbed about it, Steve Hogan himself said, look, I know, first, we're the first ones that have great concern for this community. Unlike a typical football ownership team, it's not some private entity that owns a team and needs a place to play and expects the community to help pay for it. This is a nonprofit organization that started at an Elks Lodge. And they said, man, we want to raise some money, but we want to raise serious money to help charities, and maybe football games are the way to do it. And so that's how the first bowl started. So they have this mission, this charter to benefit the community, but they have to build this giant place for these games to occur. And so the challenge, more than an answer, it was just a question. Could Orlando be the first city to figure out how to make a sporting venue actually good for the neighborhood it's in? Could we find ways to leverage this resource as an economic engine that catalyzes transformation for an entire neighborhood? That was the beginning of Lift Orlando, and that's how we sort of got started, and a group of companies started getting together to really start asking the question, well, how do we do that? How do we come together to solve that problem? And in the context of the work, we've encountered over and over again that sometimes in our favor and sometimes like going against the grain, we run into the legacy of the gaps between the races in our community. And how do we come together around one city as citizens of one community for a better and brighter future? For the last 10 years before coming into this role, have been running a leadership development organization, originally called the Greater Orlando Leadership Foundation. And it was founded to really help leaders find a greater sense of compass that align their mission, their calling, their personal faith, and their work life with one sense of integrity. But one of the agendas that it's always had is to address the issues of racial reconciliation. How do we come together as a community in the things that divide us most? And I think because of that, I've ended up speaking in a lot of settings about diversity of cultures. And one of my biggest pet peeves on that subject is the fact that the very first step towards segregated thinking that is both evil and destructive and unproductive in every way is the illusion that any two of us are exactly alike. When we begin to believe that because you came from the same town, you look the same way, dress the same way, talk similar to me, that you and I are the same, then it's very easy to look at anyone else who's different and think that they're different from the two of us. But when we begin to appreciate people's uniqueness, I never have much of an appreciation when folks talk about being blind to color. Oh, I'm colorblind. Oh, I don't see where people are from or what their heritage is. And like, well, gosh, you're missing out a whole lot of what makes who that person is. I'd much rather you saw the fullness of who they are and fully appreciated their uniqueness, because then and only then, if any of you have leadership aspirations especially, then and only then can you fully leverage what they have to contribute. Because all of us bring a unique contribution to the teams where we really feel like we're on a dream team. So here's the thing I want you to do to open up our time today. Hopefully each of you has a small pipe cleaner. There's pipe cleaners of different colors at your chairs. The folks in the back, if you don't have one, just raise your hand. We'll make sure you have one. We need one over here. If someone could pass me a couple pipe cleaners to these sofas in the front, that would be awesome. Brian, bring those up. Thank you. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a moment to pick a partner, find someone next to you that you can do this with. And I want you to take a moment and think about one thing that makes you unique. What's one thing that makes you unique and different as the person that you are? And if you recall when you discovered that, was there an event, an experience, a moment in your life when that just became real and clear for you? And in as brief a moment as possible, in about a minute and a half, I want you to share that experience with the person next to you. But before you do that, I want you to take 2 minutes to shape that pipe cleaner into a symbol that might represent what you're about to tell them. So here, we're going to test your artistic abilities. Hey, this is Creative Mornings, right? So take that pipe cleaner, shape it into some inspiring work of art that is going to communicate your unique fingerprint in life. And then you're going to take a minute to share that with the person next to you, and they're going to do the same thing with you. And the time to start is now. Okay, let me bring you back. Five, four, three, two, and one. Thank you. One person, share with me, what did you learn about your neighbor's symbol? Yes.
I learned that my friend who I've known for quite a while and just accept as a sister, even though we were not born as sisters, faced racial prejudice as a child.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of cool to find that out about people that we think we know, because it's our experiences make up who we are in so many ways. Thank you. So when we talk about color, for me, the conversation often started as a leadership challenge, right? Because my audience was primarily leaders. They're trying to figure out, man, this world is changing, and it's changing really, really fast. The transfer of who's in charge and what leadership looks like and the people that you're interacting with are not the same. It's not the same good old boy network that you used to be able to just kind of use your code language with and get things done. Suddenly we have more women. In fact, it's been predicted that in the next 20 years, more women will be in C-level roles than we have ever seen before in history. Largely to do not with the absence of men in that role, although our men are in a great crisis when it comes to education and leadership while women are thriving, but the fact that the leadership of the future requires a more holistic, relational style of leadership that comes much more natural for women, when men want to be a little bit more logical and linear and left brain about how they lead. This great Nina Jablonski is one of the kind of well-known anthropologists who has really made a name for herself in the study of the evolution of skin color. And for the first time proved for me one of my childhood theories with solid science. It just always seemed to me odd that we all had different colors, that we came in different shades, but there seemed an obvious connection to sort of the root parts of the world where each of our kind of families would come from, that some places were just darn hotter than others. And you spend enough time in the sun and you just do get darker. That's true for most. And so wouldn't that have something to do over many years? And so her research has proven very much that fact, that because of the places where many people inhabited for many generations and the reaction to melanin in their skin to UV rays from the sun had the impact over many generations to change the shade of colors of skin in people. And as much as science may validate that we are so much more alike than we are different, we're still living through this junk. We've got stuff like Ferguson and stuff happening in this community and all over the country. And in many ways, one of the things that makes me happy that I've heard recently with the whole Project DTO initiative is the conversation about bringing back officers that are just riding bikes and walking down blocks throughout Paramore. Because it used to be the day where officers knew everybody in a neighborhood because they walked, they had a beat, right? And they walked that block over and over again. So when they got called and there was a domestic violence issue, they know it's Joey who drank too much again. He's getting into it with Mildred. I'll go talk to him. I mean, somebody told me the story about getting pulled down to the station when they got in trouble once, and this is a gentleman who's now in his 70s, and he was getting ready to be booked when the captain walked in, pulled him into his office, spanked him, then called the kid's parents, told them that he spanked them and what the kid had done. He got home, got spanked by his mom, and when his dad got home, his dad spanked him too. No, and I'm not recommending that cops spank kids now. But there was just a different time, and the only difference really is relationship. This junk happens because those guys feel like they're coming into a war zone and they don't know a soul there but people that look intimidating to them. And so they come dressed for World War III. But if they knew the names of the people they were talking to, if they really live and serve in that same community, there'd be no reason for the amount of fear that brings out the wrong reactions in situations like this. The challenge that we are facing as a community is that us together with every major city in the country and around the world are exploding in growth. For some strange reason, even though for the 60 years in the latter part of the last century, cities were dying, hollowing out because of suburban sprawl, cities are being reborn. Since the year 2000, for a combination of reasons, but mostly unexplainable to me, we all started moving back to cities, but back in ways we've never done before. In fact, since 2008, for the very first time in human history, there are more human beings living in urban dwellings than ever in the history of the world. Cities have become the natural habitat of people. And as we're moving back, there are some phenomena that are making it difficult for us to live together. And in Orlando, one of the things we're facing, like many cities, is the problem of chronic poverty. Not only is it by itself a complex issue, but it is influenced in forceful ways by great forces. One, the heritage of concentrated poverty. That there are pockets of poverty in our community where people live in the shadow of progress and prosperity and opportunity and yet are worlds apart from it. There are some days I drive down South Street and I feel like I'm in a third world country. I'm no longer in America. The reality that when you grow up in that context of poverty, and if everyone that lives around you is also poor, in the days of segregation, as I have residents here in this community who tell me the stories, the good thing, if you could count a good thing, was that even though you might be poor, across the street might be an attorney, a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, because they were all forced to live in the same neighborhood. But children grew up with an awareness of what it meant to be educated, to be a little bit more successful, to have a little bit more, to accomplish more. The unintended consequence of desegregation in our major cities is everyone who could left. fleeing poverty to the suburbs. And then you had left there only families who could not afford to get out, couldn't even afford to get to the suburbs. So children grow up only knowing people who are poor, only knowing people who are struggling, and thinking that's the only future that waits for them. In our city, sadly, we have the memorials of this legacy still in front of us. Division Avenue is called Division Avenue for a reason. 60 years ago, if your skin was my color, that was as far east as you could live. Law demanded that you had to remain contained in the area known as Paramore, named after six-time Mayor Paramore, who decided he needed to confine the blacks in that area to manage that population. So when you have these realities, these larger external forces that divide us and create constant reminders of what keeps us apart, you have to realize that there's more to the issue that keeps us from progressing together than just a difference of opinions. It's a legacy of injustice that we all as a community have to own and find ways to bridge together. I shared these with you. So what we arrived at were 5 principles that we found were completely missing from approaches for social change in Orlando. A 3-year research project about 10 years ago scoured all the nonprofits in Central Florida. We found first alarming fact that there were 3,800 nonprofits and charities in Orlando. That was 10 years ago. There's probably a ton more now. To me, that's kind of an alarming number. In the same 3-year period, the Gallup Institute was ranking us lower and lower towards the bottom of the list of cities in the country for overall well-being. How could that be in spite of all the millions we were raising and using to benefit the poor? And now we understand because of this toxic charity phenomena that in fact it's maybe because of the way we're trying to help the poor. That we're not trying to help them prosper and build better lives. We're just trying to alleviate and maintain a life of poverty with as best conditions as possible. And that's not in the best interest of anyone. So here are the principles of their formula. One has been cradle to career education. You adopt the success of a child all the way from as close to birth to making sure they graduate and go to college and have a successful career. Because at every single transition along the way, going to middle school, going to high school, starting elementary school, that's where they fall through the cracks.
We just kind of spread the story that we can work together. What became really tough is when we started inviting leaders of the community to be part of active conversations to put together plans. Some of the FCS folks are here, who are in the room when we began those meetings. This is me trying to convince people that we're trying to do something to help. The group immediately in front of me is about this close from kind of kicking me out of the room. And I remember one particular night, maybe 2 nights out of this, I had a blank flip chart kind of posted that was supposed to be full with ideas and suggestions and things. And I spent 2.5 hours answering the same questions over and over again to a group who was suspicious and skeptical and for good reason. We had a long list of broken promises by outsiders like me saying they were going to make things better, but really they were just going to take it down. And I remember packing my stuff up that night, honestly thinking to myself, maybe I am the devil. Or maybe I'm here to ruin everybody's life and I'm up to no good. I mean, you get something told to you 50 times in 2 hours, you start buying it after a little while. But miraculously, 15 weeks later, we had a celebration of the bowl at Steve Hogan at Florida Citrus Sports, giving an update on the construction as the classic is coming out. We have folks of all ages celebrating with us in all types in the room. And as our speaker, we had Judge Belvin Perry, who has never left the neighborhood himself. He is Chief Judge of the 9th Circuit Court of the state of Florida, an icon in this community. He just decided, you know what, no matter what happens in this neighborhood, I'm not leaving. If I leave, what happens? And what's interesting about the neighborhood just south of the apartments where most of the crime was concentrated is you've got him, you've got 4-star Navy Admiral, David Brewer, you've got Erica Dunlap from Miss America, you've got just these amazing, amazing icons of local African American culture who said, this is my neighborhood and I'm not going anywhere. And so to be able to work with them and real leaders, Orlando today actually boasts more African American C-level leaders than any other city in Florida, which by number puts us way up there in the list of the community. So there are leaders and people to partner with in this community that we do not have in other parts of the country. So as we look at West Downtown, my hope is that you would be advocates for growth that is just, for growth that includes investing in education that is good for all, and housing that is not only beautiful and splendid, it makes people want to move downtown and grow, but also makes room for affordable units for people who would otherwise be displaced, places where they would simply be lost. We've got, this is a poor graphic somebody gave me, of almost $5 billion of new developments coming out of the ground. This isn't even all of it. In the next few years, some of it already in place. Downtown is changing dramatically, folks. We could do nothing. And in 5 years, 10 years, our city will be a totally different place. We will be recognized. The question is, what will we do to make sure it changes to the kind of city we can all be proud of? We want to brag to our children and our grandchildren about it, because we're the kind of place it is for everyone. One cute little thing it's been amusing and encouraging to me. We felt like the area needed a new name, but we didn't feel the right to name it. And so residents of these communities have named Lake Lagoon, Sunset Lake, Clear Lake, Rock Lake, Lake Man. There's this whole area west of OET are these beautiful lakefront properties. And they kind of named the whole area the neighborhoods of West Lakes. And so this is sort of the community that's rising around the ball with the vision of the people who live here. Lastly, I'll say I found this, I don't know how many saw this article, it was in National Geographic about the new face of America. Somewhere or another, as we figure out how to get along, in urban cities in particular, the more we blend, the more we all just look like each other. One day we're all going to say to each other, you all look alike. I probably immediately get told by somebody that they think they know me from somewhere or recognize me from somewhere. One is I have a weird resemblance to Harry Belafonte, so many people don't even know who that is. But a certain age group, when they look at me funny, I know exactly where we're going. But it's that, you know, I come from parents that are a blend. And so I think in many ways, as we become more integrated in our urban core, figuring out how do we get along, and not forget our heritage, not sweep it under the rug, but how do we appreciate it and celebrate it and build the kind of city of the future that's a better place for all of us. Thank you so much. God bless you.